And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection, your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Revenue sharing is a business arrangement where profits are distributed among stakeholders such as employees, partners, or even governments based on a predetermined agreement. We begin today's Open Connection by rejoining the conversation with President and CEO of First Nations Bank of Canada, Bill Lomax.
They don't ask for equity, they ask for revenue sharing, government to government, sovereignty. Why did they ask for that? Part of the reason was because they didn't believe that Quebec Hydro had the chops to actually be worth a lot of money. They would rather take a toll on every kilojoule of electricity that flowed through and have some control over how things are done in their community than to take equity in the deal. Now, I am not saying for a second that you shouldn't be pursuing equity, but I am saying you should consider whether or not it's actually the right option. They made the right choice. They got a very nice sum of money. I'll talk a little bit about that. What did they get? Ended up with $70 million a year over 50 years. You do the math, that's $3.5 billion guaranteed money. No way they could be guaranteed that with equity in Quebec Hydro. And Quebec Hydro has gone near bust a couple of times, so they made the right choice. Quebec Hydro could fail utterly, and they would continue to get paid. That's how they looked at it, and that was the right way to look at it. One of the other things that they asked for was the transfer of all treaty obligations to the Cree people. Basically, they said, give us the money and we'll build the schools and the hospitals and the infrastructure. And that's, again, they wanted control. They got it. Sovereignty, right? Then 6 years later, the Grand Council of Crees, having to dealt with the Quebec government, and even more sophisticated now, took on the federal government. They ended up with the federal new relationship agreement that was signed in 2008, inspired very much by the Pays de Brave. It resolved the 30 years of disputes over the implementation of the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement. The payment, $1.4 billion. Very nice sum of money. This is really what I'm talking about when I talk about the clout, ambition, and resilience of First Nations. We see the success that they've had with that. They are really one of the most progressive nations in the country. And it's because they've demanded sovereignty, they demanded control, and they've exercised it. In closing, I want to encourage you to dream big, to take advantage of this opportunity revolution that's right here, right now, right in front of you. Take advantage of it. This is your time. First Nations have some of the most promising and inspiring business opportunities in this country. And there's still a lot of work to do. We still have to build a lot of capacity within our nations. We have to increase our access to education and build wealth within our communities. But we're there. That opportunity is now. It's not just about economic reconciliation. It's really about building a better, more inclusive, and more prosperous Canada for us all. Thank you.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Revenue sharing and equity offer different ways for companies to raise capital or incentivize stakeholders. Revenue sharing involves sharing a percentage of the company's revenue with partners or investors, while equity involves selling a portion of the company's ownership. Let us rejoin the conversation as Bill takes some questions from the audience.
I would like you to expand on your comment about the differentiation between the revenue share and equity.
I think there are absolutely times when equity is the best and important option. And I'm not discouraging anybody from looking at equity as an opportunity. But if there's an opportunity to get a guaranteed payment for the life of the project, no matter whether or not that project becomes super successful or not, you have to consider that, because equity can always go to zero. It can go to 100, it can go to 1 million, it can grow really large, but it doesn't always, right? And for something like electricity coming from a dam, that very much makes sense to say, I want to take a toll on that. If you got gas flowing through your area, maybe taking a toll on that makes more sense than having equity in the pipeline, right? It might not, but you should ask yourself that question, right? So that's really what I'm getting at. It's not that I'm saying you shouldn't do it, because in a lot of cases you should, but you need to explore all the options. And I think that that is an important one to think about.
Bill, I want to thank you very much for coming to Terrace and making such a presentation. It's at a very critical time right now for First Nations in this region, because we have so many different opportunities on our table, and they're all worth $200 million or more. And one of the things that you and I both recognize is that 12 years ago, First Nations didn't even buy property.
That's right.
Right? So it's really hugely significant to understand the financial mix that you need to have and what it is that you need to back a $200 million loan if you are indeed talking equity. So those kinds of things, I want you to be aware of, of all of the opportunities here. We've got, an opportunity to work with BC Hydro in the Site C line. We have an opportunity to work with LNG Canada in terms of, purchasing pieces of LNG Canada. We've got an opportunity. There are other First Nations here who are building their own LNGs. We just finished buying Skeena sawmills for whatever that was, to try and see if we can revive the forestry industry again. There's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done in this region. And with, Site C Dam and DP World and all of the mines in the region, and, CN flowing right through, the opportunities are endless if we tend to think about it and if we decide to grow and participate in the growth. But there are real critical steps between here and there. Really, really critical. And extremely critical for communities who come from poverty, who come from massive unemployment, who we have elders who don't even get CPP because they've never been able to work. The women didn't hold the jobs. They were not the loggers. And this is, all across, First Nations. So women outlive men.
Yep.
And they don't have the security of, Canada Pension Plan if they didn't work. And so our chief wanted to make sure that one of the laundry list of things that he left behind for us was to put together a pension plan for our people. And I think it's a wonderful idea to be able to do that, but we have to walk carefully.
Great.
So thank you so much for your words, and you and I need to talk.
I think a pension plan of sorts is really quite important for the reasons that you stated. Also for, in a lot of cases, First Nations leadership, people who give their lives to managing and running a First Nation as a leader. Oftentimes they're left out in the cold too once the election happens, where they're on the outs. I've seen down in the States a fellow who is a president of one of the most successful nations in the country working as a Walmart greeter when he lost the election, and that shouldn't be happening. So I fully agree.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Drones, LiDAR, and other remote sensing technologies allow for precise monitoring of forest health, growth, and regeneration, helping foresters make informed decisions about resource management. We begin the conversation with panel discussion topic, Outlook for the Forestry.
There's no Victoria people here telling us what forestry should and shouldn't be. And I think we've got the right panel here today to talk about what the outlook is in forestry. So with that, I'll pass it on to each of them to talk about who they are and what they do, and then we'll get into some questions. And then if there are questions from the audience, we'll accept some of those as well. So I'll give it to you, Dennis.
So my name is Dennis Callahan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Roga Group of Companies. It's 10 different companies operating more or less throughout British Columbia. We have a number of partnerships with Indigenous nations. One that is fairly well known around here is Kaya Resources, which we own jointly with Witsett First Nation. And we do probably in a normal year between 1.5 million and 2 million cubic meters of timber harvesting and delivery. This year we're going to do about half that. So I think we'll be talking about that later.
For sure. Troy?
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to sit on the panel. I was quite happy to come in and help out where I can. But my name is Troy Sam from Kitsum-Kalem First Nation. My traditional name is Samoygat Hots of Waplagach of Kitsum-Kalem. I've been an elected band councillor for the past 17 years, and recently I've taken on the role as Deputy Chief for Kitsum-Kalem to take over for our late Chief, Don Roberts, who is the longest serving Chief Councillor in Kitsum-Kalem. And I remember when Nation to Nation first started, he was part of that. Recently, also, I've taken on the role of Assistant Manager of Kalem Ventures Limited after our previous General Manager, Lyle Bolton, has passed away. Kitsum-Kalem, a couple things about them, or us. We have recently initialed our treaty agreement with Canada and BC just this past June 25th, and we're really proud to say that Chief Roberts was around to initial off on that agreement. Kitsum-Kalem, Diane already mentioned that we recently purchased Skeena Sawmills out of receivership because one of Chief Roberts' vision was to keep it local. And Kitsum-Kalem, we're continuing to keep communication with everyone in the region to try and get forestry going again.
I'm Rick Brower. I'm the co-owner of Westland Resources Limited here in Terrace, a relatively small consulting firm in natural resource management. I'm a registered professional forester. I've been doing it for far too many years, it feels like. But I grew up in Terrace, went away for about 15 years, came back, and started the company with a co-worker of mine after the Skeena Cellulose company failed. And so we are it's no surprise, or we're very familiar with the challenges of forestry. This area has seen, I think personally, I've been seen through 7 cycles of ups and downs, and our company is all about trying to help our clients weather those storms and maybe change it so that we don't have ups and downs and things like that. I'm married, wife and daughter, like I say, live here in Terrace, and my experience is all over coastal BC and then Northwest.
That's awesome. So we've got the boots on the ground people to solve the forestry situation in British Columbia today, and we've got 55 minutes to do that. So Rick, you talked about challenges. Maybe we could start with that and Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing as challenges and in the industry and in the sector.
So one of the big things is the challenges are different depending on where you are in the province. In the interior, you have fiber supply issues related to fires and Mount Pine beetle and spruce beetle and things like that, and a very quote unquote homogeneous type of forest where you're very suited to turning logs into lumber and things like that. Northwest BC, our challenge is that we have a lot of what I call now fiber quality wood. We used to call it pulp wood. There are no pulp mills here anymore, so there's no point calling it that anymore. It's fiber wood. It's really good fiber, but it's a real challenge to get it to a market that was willing to pay for what it costs to produce it, to bring it to that market. So that's a really huge challenge, what we call the timber profile. And then the concept of dealing with our friends in government, the BC government in particular, because they're challenged with the concept of how do they implement UNDRIP in a way that's reflective of the fact that we have over 200 nations in BC, because that means you need 200 solutions. And governments is usually structured around broad brush, one-size-fits-all type solutions, and we see those challenges all over the place. And then another big challenge is just a shortage of skilled and competent people. We're lucky in Terrace, we've got third-generation loggers, but a lot of areas we've lost a lot of our loggers. They've aged out of the process, and there's not people to replace them. And that's not just logging, it's in my own industry. I am having a hard time finding new staff, things like that. So a skilled and competent workforce is a big challenge as well.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
In BC, forestry permitting process involves obtaining various authorizations and permits for activities such as lumber harvesting and road construction. These permits are governed by Forest Act and the Forest and Range Practices Act. In this final segment of Open Connection, Troy Sam shares some of the challenges in the permitting process.
Three things. One of the biggest one is the permitting process. Just not even an hour ago, I was talking with Rich Seymour from Kitsilas, wondering, because they're in the same boat as us waiting for permits. We've been waiting for some permits that should have simply rolled over. So trying to get through the red tape to get the permits is approved a little more efficiently. Markets, that's a pretty obvious one, because the markets have been such a up and down cycle, and Rick touched on it with capacity, because we are losing a lot of our workers.
Yeah.
And those are what.
So Troy, what's holding up the permits? I can give you a Vanderhoof answer, but I think it's good. What's holding up permits here? What is holding up the permitting process?
Well, what I'm experiencing, it's not the local. It's just the new way the permits are being processed. From what I understand, things have changed. I was just thinking about this a few minutes ago. Like, when we first got into logging back in 2004, when Kalem Ventures was incorporated, that was right at the end of the forest, where you had to have forest development plans, and there's a transition period in there, and that transition period allowed the industry to adapt to the new ways that were coming down with the new Forest and Range Act, and I think if we could transition so we could continue getting the permits at a timely manner, and then we could work the bugs out of the new system.
Yeah, I think that would help all of industry and all of the communities that are supported by that industry. So, Dennis, what are some of the challenges you see?
Again, the permits. We have had gear on our Lakeland contract out of Prince George parked on and off all summer, and the mill recently just ran out of wood, but they're getting permits that they applied for 2 years ago now it's in the Prince George TSA. And then Rick also hit it on the head. The workforce actually is old. Like our crews are, they're baby boomers, and it is challenging to find younger people that want to run equipment and stay in camp. And you also have to be a little bit handy if you're gonna run heavy machinery. Like, it's not necessarily something you can teach. And the workforce continues to get older despite efforts that everybody's making.
I think you can teach it, because I think the kids today, and please don't take this the wrong way, but the kids today will pull out their phone and YouTube how to fix it. So I think that they're pretty good at that. But I want to go back to the opportunity part of this question. And Rick, you talked about some of the opportunity. I keyed into the talk that you don't call it pulpwood anymore. And we see in places like Houston where the bigs were hauling, I'm going to say 50% saw log to Prince George to a pulp mill. Yet there are sawmills that should be making dimensional wood along the way, supporting all of our communities, wanting that wood, but it's going to a pulp mill. Do you see that the fiber that you used to call pulpwood, do you see that as a value for communities on, I'm going to call it the east-west line here, from Prince George to Prince Rupert? Do you think that's a value? And I'll set the tone where some of the licensees are paying $140 to $150 a cubic meter to get fiber to their sawmill. So I'll put it in that context, and then tell me about what the fiber is that might be that opportunity, the pulpwood.
Sure, and thanks. That's a great question in terms of the opportunity. So a lot of companies used to talk about right log to the right mill. And generally speaking, if you're sending a saw log to a pulp mill, you've broken that model. So what that means is that companies are no longer working either collectively together, they're now siloing themselves, which is a challenge. So we need companies to stop thinking only of themselves, which is a real problem in today's world where it's all about shareholder return for public companies. So opportunity is the things like where you've got nations taking over tenures and taking over companies because they're no longer beholden to this kind of quarterly return concept. That'll change that dynamic to some extent. Community forests will help along that kind of context. So, so I'm gonna veer all over the place here. But so one of the things that happens with things like tenure, so companies like Canfor giving up tenure to a First Nation could well change a significant part of that dynamic about getting the right log to the right place, wherever that should be. Because 100% you're right, if we're sending our saw logs to a pulp mill, that log is not going to the right place.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.